Right, it's Sunday morning. Lionel Richie won't have got up yet because he's having a day in bed. I'm going to put this cylinder on. I'm going to have a look inside it and see what it's like, see if it's got any lubrication in it. Now, I would put some money on that when I put that cylinder in originally, and it was quite a long time ago, I must admit, because I don't use that truck all that much. I think I built that truck about 4 years ago, maybe 5. I did put some rubber grease on the piston. See there? Now this one has been lubed up, look. You see it's a bit shiny. But look at the size of the piston, the rubber. Look at that. I can't see the screen. But look at the difference. It looks almost the same. But look at this rubber, how bigger it is than that one. It hasn't swelled up, it's just different. The bore size is exactly the same. I don't think I've got my caliper here, I think my caliper's upstairs. But that seems an awful lot softer than that seal. Now, has that seal been compromised by it's just a bad quality rubber? There, you see. Or is it the excess pressure of the Isuzu clutch is pushing fluid down there? The lip on here and the lip on here is different. You see this one's a bit sharper. Look at these, see it's rounded, so fluid's going to pass by there. The idea is when you've got pressure, when you're pushing the clutch down, this will expand ever so slightly and stop it leaking. That's the idea. I don't know, something strange. Anyway, I'm going to put some rubber grease on there. Do you know, that's the problem with these jobs. Every time you get a cylinder, there's something different. You know, there's always something a little bit different. And of course, we put the rubber grease on just to help it on its way, you know, so it doesn't fail. But I don't know. Does it work? I don't know. Maybe better than nothing, isn't it? So we'll assemble that. Always put your top on your grease. And we've got some lubricant now in there, and we're confident. Although it did have something in. Now, a lot of the times, if you saw before, I've taken these cylinders out and they've been dry as a bone. Well, that's not much of an advantage, is it? Oops. I'm fighting against something here. Get in. There we go. So that's it. That's done. Now we'll assemble it onto here. I've put some oil on here. I've put some aluminium thread guard on there. Bang it in. Push the pedal up. Now this clutch pedal here, it's the later type with an assistant spring here. Because a lot of you girls can't push a clutch down like us men. You know, the clutch on the Isuzu, like I say, is big, and I had a bit of a hard time trying to work out the ratio for the cylinder, for the slave cylinder. I didn't have much of a choice. Fortunately, I had the original Isuzu cylinder, the slave cylinder, and I had a Land Rover one, and they're almost identical except for the pipe sizes. So with a few adapters I played around. Now at the beginning, because the clutch was relatively new, oh look, I forgot to put water on. That's me talking. Because the clutch was relatively new, it was dragging a little bit, so I swapped it over and put the Land Rover one on, which helped tremendously. However, Hydraulics to me is a bit of a, well, not a mystery, but I didn't do hydraulics. It's just like asking me to do about electronics. I know a bit, but I don't know a lot, because I had to be self-taught, and that was always a problem. Going back to your apprenticeship, the old guys didn't want to teach you anything because their jobs were at risk, you know, because the company was on its arse, and so everything was a big mystery, secret. So, you know, I had to teach myself a lot of this stuff. But when you got hydraulics, principally, let me get this right. The system is, it's like mechanical advantage. It's just like levers. You know, you put a small weight on by using a lever on a pivot. You can lift a big load, and that's very much the same idea. But with this particular job, with a clutch, you need to move a rod a distance, maybe an inch or, you know, 30 millimeters or so. Whereas with brakes, you don't need to move it that much, because the pistons which contact the pads, which then contact the rotors, hardly have to move at all, millimeters. So therefore you don't have a distance to move, but you use the mechanical advantage of a cylinder, a small area, to push a big area. And think about it. This is, I think these are 3/4 inch, aren't they? Yeah. See, these are 3/4 inch. But if you, I mean, somebody out there mathematically advanced will work this out. But you've got 4-pot calipers. That means it's got 4 pistons per caliper. You've got 8 at the front and 4 at the back. You've got 12 pistons to move. But if you work out the surface area of all those 12 pistons, it'd be huge. But you've got a 3/4 inch piston pushing fluid, so the mechanical advantage of that is huge, because you're not moving the distance, but you're moving a lot of weight, if you see what I mean. So that's why you've got that clamping pressure on pads, because you're using the mechanical advantage in a different way. In a clutch, again, you're using a small cylinder to move a relatively other small cylinder, but the mechanical advantage is to move that rod a longer distance. I mean, that's why you have a lot of problems sometimes with drum brakes if they're not set up properly, because the pistons are double acting. They come out of the pistons and push the shoes apart. Well, they're actually, if your drums and your pads are not, your shoes are not like machined together, or they're new, or you're putting new shoes into old drums and they're not correctly adjusted, or they haven't bedded in, you'll find the pedals extremely soft, and you're constantly adjusting it. Well, you don't really get that problem with rotors, disc brakes, because they're sort of self-adjusting. Oh, let's go, wait a minute, this is going to be really complicated. If you look at the piston, when you're putting seals into a caliper, you don't really notice, but the seals are actually the square section seals, but they're slightly off centre. They're so that when you press the seal, when the piston goes this way, the rubber's trying to pull it back a little bit. It's just a hair, and that's, if not, they wouldn't come back. They'd clamp, and your pads would be rubbing all the time, and the rotor, it just allows them to come back, and that's why it's important to make sure all the pistons and everything's all free, so you get that. Just, it's ever so slight. Well, that's what I was told anyway. I believe them. Millions wouldn't. Now, have I got that typed up? Because I'll be talking to you guys. I forgot now. Right, that one's in. I've got the washer on there. Let's turn it upside down. Press that down. Dear me. So much to learn in so little time to learn it. With the spring on the clutch like this, it's so much easier to do than fighting away with that old, like that old series one which the pedal was flopping about. Because this spring, let me get this nut on, I'll show you. This spring goes over centre, if you see what I mean. It's just like it's like a pivot, but once it goes over centre, it locks, just like a latch or something like that. God, I thought I'd forgotten to put that in. I have so much stuff in here. And yeah, it works. But the disadvantage of this clutches I've found out, you know, this system works quite well. Until you're running low on fluid. Like I was finding that was leaking. And of course, normally you only press your pedal like that. So the spring gives you a bit of advantage. But when you're on the car and you're running out of fluid, the pedal will go to the floor and you're driving and you're desperately trying to kick this bloody piece up with your foot because it won't spring up. Let me show you a clutch. These are the only bits I've got, but this is a typical clutch off a Land Rover 2.5, naturally aspirated or a TDI or whatever it is. That's it, right? Now, a lot of people have problems when they put more power through the engines that the clutches slip. We don't get that problem in the Isuzu because this is the clutch plate. This is the clutch cover, sorry. That's the clutch cover, and there's a TDI. Now, you can see there is a massive amount of surface area. Look at this. See this bit here compared to this bit here? It's massive amount of clutch clamping because this clutch is out of a commercial truck. Now, the whole engine was out of a commercial truck. And I think in the Parenti they used the V8 clutch, which was a little bit bigger than this. I think this is 9.5 inch. See, look, that's why I'm always in inches, because a bloody tape measure always in inches. Oh no, that's 9 inch. This one, 12 inch. You see? So you've got a massive amount of surface area to clamp onto the clutch, and this is why when you're pushing down here, well, the spring is quite heavy, you know. But I put this in to the Isuzu using the Isuzu bell housing and the correct bearing and the correct Isuzu fork, but the cylinder on the outside here was either an Isuzu or a Land Rover one. So the idea is when the piston pushes like this, there's a pivot which pushes the spring in here, which releases the clamp pressure here. Works quite well. Now you're going to ask me how did I make the spline from here work with this clutch, because this clutch was a real awkward one. The spline in the Isuzu gearbox was something like 11 spline, or was it fine spline, but I think there was one tooth different. I think these are 24 spline and the Isuzu was 23. It's one way or the other, I can't remember, it was like 7 years ago. But anyway, what I did was I got the Isuzu clutch and I drilled out all the support rivets here. Took this out, like split down a clutch from the same manufacturer. So say for example it was, let's say for example it was AP, right? Took this bit off, took all the bits out, and this piece is like replaceable for different splines. So all clutches really are very much the same, you know, for the springs and the clamping pressure and not the clamping pressure, but the diameter and the friction material are very, very much the same. So 9, 9.5, 10, blah, blah, blah. They're all variants, but other cars might have a 9-inch clutch, but a 10 spline here. Now, this was a clever bit. When I stripped down the Isuzu clutch, I found out that the centre would fit a Land Rover one, and vice versa. So I simply took this piece out of here, transported it to the Isuzu, and it worked. I think I've got one on the bench. Wait a minute, I'll show you. So this is what I'm on about. This is the centrepiece of the clutch. Now this is out of a TDI, and I kept these just in case I do another Isuzu. I can transplant those into the GM clutch and it'll work. Now the only thing I had to do, and I'll try and put some pictures in, the length was slightly different. Well, I wasn't bothered about that. But the diameter it went through the clutch pressure plate was different. So I got JP just to make me some spacers up, and it worked perfectly. So then what he did was, good old JP, I don't know if I've got any box, no I haven't. He made me some new rivets for here. Can you see these here? He made me some new rivets, and I just riveted them over and I used it again. So I had a perfectly good clutch plate. So that's it. Now, parenti people and people who do Isuzus, I did read reports that was chatter in your gearbox and things like this. The 4-cylinder was prone to chattering. The big Isuzu with 3.9. But this didn't, because this clutch is a huge weight, so it adds to the mass of the flywheel, if you see what I mean. So you're not putting a little weedy TDI clutch on, you know, like a clutch cover. I think we should measure. I think we should weigh them and find out. Back again. I'm using my old bathroom scales here for weighing. This is a TDI clutch, and that weighs in at 15 kilos. No, 5 kilos for that one. And the Isuzu one is 10 kilos. It's twice as heavy as the TDI one. It's interesting, isn't it? So you've got an extra. It's like having a heavier flywheel on. A lot of guys who do racing cars and things like that, they go the other way. They want a lighter flywheel, so the engine's a bit more responsive. But when you've got a diesel with a big heavy flywheel, you've got that nice momentum going, so it doesn't chatter. I don't know why I told you all that. It's got nothing to do with what I'm doing. Right, put that in my bag of bits. Keep that for another day. Now we'll set up this. I forgot where I was now. Now we'll set up this. You can tell I don't plan anything. So I've got this here. I've got the nut backed off, and that's in its happy place because that really close. The pedal is against its stop. Right? That's the height. I'm not going to adjust that because it was a perfect height. So I'm going to back up that nut here, so it touches, and you see it's turning the thing. And what we want is just that little bit of free play. Yep. Just back it off a bit more. We want that little bit of free play. And again, I'm going to blow down here. It should blow through. Correct. That was a good job, wasn't it? But if I have it over adjusted, I might not be able to do that same experiment. Oh no, that's right, that's right. But the thing is, don't wind this down thinking you're going to get a better pedal. You know, the pedal's hard. If you can blow through here without any free play here, it's right. Right? So now it's just a matter of putting the nut on the other side. In fact, I think now it's a matter of finding where I put the nut. Look, I missed some bits out of the bag now. Where's the nut gone? Let's put these little bits in here because we're going to lose those. Right. Oh, is it still on the rod? No, wait a minute. That's one. I'll have to find me nut.